I laid out that the record demonstrates that, in fact, the events of January 6, 2021, which were unprecedented and tragic, were an insurrection. Reviewing the facts presented, the evidence, the law, the history, we determined under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that Mr. Trump engaged in insurrection and therefore was disqualified.
That was Maine Secretary of State Shenna Bellows giving herself an unwarranted pat on the back for barring President Trump from appearing on Maine's 2024 presidential ballot. I guess defending democracy now means doing away with democracy, right? It's funny how that works. For more on this, we'll bring in former Trump campaign aide Rick Gates, along with Democratic strategist Jonathan Harris. So, Jonathan, I'm going to start with you. We know the Supreme Court is going to likely take up this Colorado ruling and maybe even the Maine ruling early in the new year. So Michigan Supreme Court rejected this, and other states have already done so. Can you translate for me how banning someone from running for president based on an untested legal theory and a crime for which that candidate was never charged, let alone convicted, and then claim with a straight face that disenfranchising voters is protecting democracy? I'm listening. Go ahead.
Well, first, it's super important to understand what the purpose of the 14th Amendment is. It's to keep someone from running for president who could try to overthrow the government or has a history of trying to overthrow the government.
But hold on a second. That's not, and most legal scholars, including the New York Times, had an op-ed from a very legal lawyer. That is not what it says, because the president is not an officer. It specifically does not say president. So that in and of itself is an issue.
Well, so the issue, again, like you said, this is going to come down to the Supreme Court to interpret all this as they see fit. But what I'm saying is that basically watering it down to a simplistic sentence, that's what the purpose of the 14th Amendment is, to keep someone from running for office who would try to overthrow the government. It was targeted at Confederates before. And so if you think that the 14th Amendment is invalid, then do you think the 22nd Amendment is invalid? In which case, do you want President Obama to run for president again? I mean, I just think it's interesting the way that Republicans try to pick and choose what parts of the law they want enforced and when it is and isn't interfering with democracy.
Now,
you could argue that you could argue that barring someone from running for office again is also interfering with democracy, but it's the law. It's one of the amendments, just like the 14th.
But that's a clear cut, and everyone agrees that there's no issue on not being able to run for a third term. The issue here is some hack is deciding based on her will. There's no law to support what she's saying. There's certainly no criminal, but there's no criminal charges either. I could see if, on petitions there are illegible or ineligible voters who signed it. Okay, that happens all the time. This is an issue where he's never been charged for anything like this, and she is making a major decision that is barring a leading presidential candidate and disenfranchising everybody in Maine, in this case, 1 million voters. To me,
but that's how the law is handled in that state. I mean, that's just that. I mean, she's not even conservatives. If you listen to them, no matter what they say, none of them are going to say she's breaking the law. That's how the law is handled in that state. In Colorado, I think they convened the Supreme Court there to determine that Trump absolutely engaged in an insurrection. It's handled different ways.
So, I mean, why don't you just say he murdered somebody? I mean, it's the same kind of thing. There's nothing to support that. Rick, let me bring Rick in 1 second.
Conservatives about what Trump actually did on January 6th. That's unbelievable.
But he wasn't charged for that. You can be as angry as you want. He's never been charged for any of that. Rick, go ahead, Rick. I mean, I know you're chomping at the bit.
I enjoyed listening to you guys. You guys had a good debate going. Look, the bottom line is, if Jonathan's premise of applying the law, equates to this, then let's ask the question, why didn't Jack Smith bring that as a charge? Because that's really what the Democrats were waiting to see when he was bringing that case forward. Was there going to be an indictment on insurrection? And there wasn't. Here's the special counsel who probably had better access than certainly the Secretary of State of Maine or Colorado or Michigan or any other state that is considering this issue. And he is not bringing any charge whatsoever on this. So this is what you see as judicial interference. And look, obviously going through the Mueller probe, I got to see a inside look at how our judicial system works, and it doesn't across the board. And I'll say that for Republicans or Democrats. This is not partisan. when you look at the way that the judges and the prosecutors across our country right now are arbitrarily and subjectively applying these different premises to the insurrection idea, it goes to show you the wide disparity of decisions that are coming down, and it's creating a greater issue. I look at it at a higher level where who's benefiting from this? Our adversaries, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, because it's tearing apart the fabric of democracy in our country.
All right, let me ask you this. So you have a representative in Maine and a representative in Arizona, Republicans, who now are going to try to bar Joe Biden from the ballot because they're coming up with something like, you know, open borders, whatever. Does that make sense, Jonathan? They're going to basically charge him with a crime?
It's sort of like the silly
yeah, but it's all, isn't it all silly though?
Well, no, because again, I miss the Republican Party pre-Trump that I thought was ridiculous, that loved Reagan, where like they loved the country still, and there was a minimum standard of behavior for Republicans. And the things that Trump is doing right now, they would never have tolerated from a candidate. If President Obama had engaged in an insurrection, had done all the things that Trump had done, not one of you would be coming to his defense. But because Trump did it, here you are lined up to try to defend him.
Incorrect.
I miss the Republican Party that loved the country more than they loved Trump, and thought that a person who would try to overturn a free and fair election, even according to Trump appointees, was a danger to the country. But they're gone now, and all there are Trump sycophants who will just obsess over supporting him no matter what he does.
No,
and
but some of us see the bigger.
His supporters would still stand there for him.
No, some of us see the bigger picture here too, and we actually have due process, which we care about, the law we care about, disenfranchising people we care about.
Don't you believe in states' rights and the states having the? That's what you guys always talk about, right?
Yeah, but this is a whole. Yes, I do. But again, there's nothing to substantiate what they're actually doing. Rick, real quick.
But that's up to the states, isn't it?
No. I mean, yes, if the crime was committed, yes, I would see that as potential. Rick, let me ask you this, okay? Do you think that the Republicans in those states, I just mentioned, right, Arizona and Maine and Pennsylvania, do you think that they should go through this and retaliate by trying to ban Joe Biden?
No, I absolutely do not think they should retaliate, because this is exactly what has been happening. It's going on with impeachment and other issues. It is tearing our country apart, and this is what we have to avoid. If there are real crimes, if there are real issues in each of these states, Republican or Democrat, that validate what they are talking about in terms of taking a candidate off the ballot, then great, let's go through that process. But in this case, what you're having is a lot of states are trying to interpret the Constitution. That's what we have the U.S. Supreme Court for. So the sooner they can take this up, the better, because otherwise you're going to have a bunch of partisan people out there on both sides trying to create as much interference as possible in our elections, and it's going to be damaging for the country.
Yeah, it really is. So anyway, look, I'm glad you both came on and spoke your piece. And this is a major debate and a major issue with a lot of consequences going forward for this country. So hopefully the Supreme Court takes it up and they are 9-0 and they are succinct in what they mean. And we don't have to go through this again. Rick Gates, Jonathan Harris, to you both. Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year. Happy well.